Former federal agent Ethan Walker was undercover as a rideshare driver in Atlanta when he was falsely accused of theft after refusing a passenger. Beaten by rival drivers and judged by prejudice in court, he stayed silent to protect a national mission. When the operation was revealed, the truth set him free. Instead of revenge, he chose grace, proving character is stronger than bias. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? And if you believe some heroes are willing to look guilty to save the innocent, this story is for you. Atlanta, Georgia moved with its usual restless rhythm under a humid, late summer sky. The air carried the scent of asphalt, still warm from the afternoon sun, and the skyline shimmered faintly beyond the rows of glass buildings and historic brick storefronts. Traffic lights blinked lazily as evening commuters drifted home, unaware that, on Peachtree Street, a quiet operation was unfolding behind tinted windows. Ethan Walker sat in the driver's seat of a silver rideshare sedan, parked along the curb across from a high-end restaurant known for its private rooms and discreet clientele. At 35, Ethan carried himself with the stillness of someone who had lived through chaos and learned to master it. He was tall, just over 6 feet, with a lean, athletic build shaped by years of tactical training. His deep brown skin contrasted with the simple gray hoodie he wore, sleeves pushed halfway up his forearms. His hair was cropped short and precise, his jawline sharp, his eyes dark and observant. Those eyes missed very little. To passers-by, he looked like any other driver waiting for a ride request. His posture was relaxed, one hand loosely resting on the steering wheel. But inside, nothing about him was casual. Ethan was a federal operative assigned to a covert investigative unit that specialized in financial crimes and organized networks. For the past 6 months, he had been undercover tracking a money laundering ring suspected of moving millions through shell companies hidden behind transportation apps and hospitality businesses. The restaurant across the street was one of their meeting points. Tonight, a key intermediary was expected to arrive. Ethan's breathing was steady. He had been trained to wait longer than discomfort allowed. Patience was not a virtue for him, it was a weapon. Across the street, the restaurant's doors opened and closed as well-dressed patrons stepped inside. Valets in crisp uniforms exchanged keys with polite smiles. A black SUV idled briefly near the entrance before pulling away. Ethan's gaze flickered subtly, analyzing license plates, faces, patterns. His phone screen displayed the rideshare app interface. To the network, he was Ethan W., 4.9 rating, 5 years driving experience. To his agency, he was a lead field operative. 2 blocks away, seated inside a small independent cafe called Magnolia Brew, Daniel Brooks stirred his coffee slowly while pretending to scroll through emails on a tablet. Daniel was in his early 40s, average height, with sandy brown hair neatly parted and a trimmed beard that gave him a thoughtful, approachable appearance. His build was solid, but not imposing. His calm blue eyes concealed a mind constantly calculating risks. Daniel had been Ethan's partner for 4 years. Unlike Ethan's quiet intensity, Daniel carried a softer demeanor. He was the kind of man who disarmed tension with measured humor. But tonight, his attention was sharp. Through a concealed earpiece, he monitored encrypted signals from Ethan's vehicle. "Still quiet?" Daniel murmured under his breath. Ethan tapped twice lightly on the steering wheel. A silent acknowledgement transmitted through coded vibration. The evening air thickened as clouds gathered faintly over the skyline. Streetlights flickered on, casting long reflections across polished car hoods. Then the passenger side door opened abruptly. A young white woman stepped inside without hesitation. She carried the confidence of someone accustomed to being accommodated. Her name, though Ethan did not know it yet, was Madison Clark. Madison appeared to be in her mid-20s, tall and slender with straight platinum blonde hair falling past her shoulders. Her skin was fair, almost porcelain under the streetlight glow. She wore tailored designer trousers and a fitted cream blouse, gold bracelets clinking softly at her wrist. Her posture was upright, chin slightly raised. There was a tension in her expression, as if impatience had long ago replaced curiosity. "Airport. I'm late," she said, not asking but instructing. Ethan glanced at her through the rearview mirror. His tone remained neutral. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm unavailable right now." Her eyebrows tightened. "Unavailable? You're parked." "I'm waiting on a confirmed ride." She leaned back sharply, crossing her arms. "So cancel it?" "I can't do that." Her frustration rose quickly. "This is ridiculous." Madison's impatience was not new to her. She had grown up in a competitive environment where success was measured loudly. Her father, a corporate executive known for his rigid discipline, had shaped her worldview early. Hesitation meant weakness. Control meant safety. Over time, that belief hardened into entitlement. She rarely heard the word no. Ethan's refusal felt like defiance. She opened the door abruptly and stepped out, heels striking the pavement with sharp clicks. Under her breath, but loud enough, she muttered words laced with assumption and prejudice, reducing him to something less than his identity. Ethan did not respond. He had endured worse. Words could bruise pride, but they could not derail focus. Across the street, Daniel's fingers paused over his tablet. He had seen the interaction through a reflection in the cafe window. "You good?" he asked quietly. Ethan gave no outward reaction, only adjusting his rearview mirror slightly to track the restaurant entrance again. A few minutes passed. Then a white sedan pulled up behind Ethan's vehicle. A man stepped out and approached the driver's side window with a casual swagger. Kevin Doyle was in his early 30s, medium height with a stocky build and close-cropped dark hair. His face was round, framed by stubble that seemed permanently unshaven. His pale skin was flushed slightly from the heat. He wore a rideshare-branded polo shirt tucked into faded jeans. His smile was tight, not friendly, but territorial. "Hey, man," Kevin said, leaning toward the window. "You new around here?" Ethan rolled the window down halfway. "Just working." Kevin chuckled lightly. "Yeah, well, this stretch? It's kind of spoken for." Ethan studied him briefly. Kevin's eyes held insecurity masked as authority. "I'm not interfering with anyone," Ethan replied calmly. Kevin's smile vanished. "Mind stepping out for a second? Let's clear something up." Ethan's instincts sharpened. He scanned the surroundings. 2 other vehicles idled nearby. Shapes moved inside. He stepped out slowly. Behind the restaurant, near a dimly lit service alley, 3 additional drivers emerged. One was tall and thin with a shaved head and nervous energy. Another, heavier set, wore a baseball cap pulled low over restless eyes. The third remained partially in shadow. Their frustration was rooted less in territory and more in economic strain. Rideshare competition had tightened profits. Blame was easier than adaptation. "You think you can just park wherever?" one of them snapped. "I'm not taking your customers," Ethan said evenly. Kevin stepped closer. "Doesn't matter." The first shove came suddenly. Ethan stumbled back slightly but did not retaliate. A punch grazed his shoulder. Another struck his ribs. He shielded his head, absorbing the hits without responding. In his mind, calculations ran faster than pain. If he defended himself with trained precision, he would reveal something they would never forget. And if one of them ended up seriously injured, law enforcement attention could compromise months of investigation. So he endured. The alley echoed briefly with scuffling feet and heavy breathing. Then, as quickly as it started, it stopped. Kevin adjusted his shirt, glancing around. "You don't belong here." They walked away, leaving Ethan alone under the flickering security light. He inhaled slowly, straightening his hoodie. His face revealed nothing. Across the street, Daniel rose from his seat, ready to intervene, but Ethan's steady posture signaled restraint. Meanwhile, 2 blocks away, inside a modest newsroom office, Olivia Grant typed notes into her laptop. Olivia was 27 with shoulder-length chestnut hair usually tied back in a loose ponytail. She wore rectangular glasses that slid down her nose when she focused intensely. Her build was slight, her style simple. Dark blazer, comfortable flats, minimal makeup. What defined her most was her persistence. Raised by a single mother who worked double shifts as a nurse, Olivia had grown up watching quiet strength. She believed journalism was not about headlines but about accountability. Recently, she had begun investigating rising tensions among rideshare drivers in Atlanta. Reports of harassment, territorial disputes, and inconsistent enforcement had caught her attention. Earlier that evening, she had photographed a cluster of drivers near Peachtree Street arguing heatedly. She did not yet know Ethan's name. Back in the alley, Ethan returned to his vehicle, wiping a faint streak of dust from his sleeve. He resumed his seat, eyes once again on the restaurant entrance. The mission remained. He adjusted the mirror one final time, steady and silent, as the first black SUV of the evening turned slowly toward the curb. The war he was fighting did not require noise, only patience. The black SUV that Ethan had been waiting for slowed briefly in front of the restaurant, its tinted windows reflecting the amber glow of streetlights. A tall man in a charcoal suit stepped out, glanced around once with measured caution, and disappeared inside. Ethan registered the face automatically: sharp cheekbones, narrow eyes, controlled posture. One of the intermediaries. The night's surveillance objective had just begun, but pain radiated quietly beneath Ethan's ribs where the earlier blows had landed. His breathing remained steady. Years of training had taught him to compartmentalize discomfort. Physical strain was a background noise he could mute at will. Across the street, Magnolia Brew was beginning to close. Daniel Brooks remained seated at the corner table, his tablet angled slightly toward the window. He had witnessed Ethan return to the car after the confrontation in the alley, posture straight despite what had clearly been an assault. Daniel's jaw tightened subtly. He trusted Ethan's judgment, but he did not like variables he could not control. Through encrypted monitoring software, Daniel watched small diagnostic indicators from a concealed transmitter embedded beneath Ethan's dashboard. Heart rate elevated briefly, then normalized. Signal strength stable. Stay clean, Daniel murmured under his breath, not as a command, but as a hope. Back near the curb, Kevin Doyle had not left the area. He leaned against his sedan, arms folded, pretending to scroll through his phone while watching Ethan through narrowed eyes. The earlier assault had not satisfied him. Kevin was a man shaped by resentment more than ambition. Growing up in a household where economic instability was constant, he had learned to view opportunity as something that could be stolen. When rideshare competition intensified, he convinced himself that outsiders were the reason his earnings dropped. And in his mind, Ethan was an outsider. Two other drivers from the earlier confrontation lingered nearby. One was Mark Hensley, tall and wiry, with restless hands and a nervous habit of chewing the inside of his cheek. He was easily influenced, the type who followed stronger personalities to feel protected. The other was Carl Benton, heavier set with a thick beard and slow, deliberate movements. Carl rarely initiated conflict, but once involved, he stood firm out of misplaced loyalty. Kevin pushed off his car and approached them again. "He's still here," he muttered. Mark shrugged. "Maybe he'll leave." Kevin shook his head. "Not unless we make him." Ethan's focus remained fixed on the restaurant entrance. He did not turn his head when Kevin approached once more. The window slid down halfway. "You got a minute?" Kevin asked, tone falsely calm. "We already talked," Ethan replied. Kevin leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Not really. Let's clear it up properly." There was something in the way Kevin's eyes flicked toward the alley that signaled intention. Ethan understood immediately. This was escalation. He scanned the block quickly. Civilian foot traffic had thinned. The valet stand was momentarily empty. Daniel was too far to intervene without exposure. and the intermediary inside the restaurant had not yet re-emerged. Leaving now would risk losing the tail. Ethan stepped out again. The alley behind the restaurant felt narrower this time. A single overhead bulb flickered weakly, casting uneven shadows along brick walls stained by years of rainwater and exhaust. The city's distant traffic hum faded here, replaced by the muted echo of footsteps. Mark and Carl emerged from opposite sides, cutting off casual retreat. Kevin positioned himself directly in front of Ethan. "You don't get it," Kevin said, jaw tight. "This area feeds us." "I'm not interfering with your rides," Ethan answered evenly. Mark scoffed. "That's not what we heard." "What you heard," Ethan replied, "doesn't change the facts." The shove came harder this time. Ethan staggered back against the wall. A punch struck his shoulder. Another clipped his jaw. Carl grabbed his hoodie, pulling him forward before releasing him with force. Ethan's reflexes screamed to respond. His muscles coiled automatically, every strike mapped in his mind with potential counters. But he forced himself still. A single decisive move could disable any one of them, but 3 injured civilians in an alley would draw police attention within minutes. So he covered his head and absorbed the blows again. Mark hesitated halfway through, breathing heavily. Violence was never as satisfying as he imagined, but Kevin, flushed with adrenaline, struck once more before stepping back. "Stay away," Kevin warned, though his voice carried uncertainty now. Ethan remained upright despite the pain. He did not speak. Silence unsettled them more than anger would have. They retreated gradually, tension dispersing into uneasy glances. When they were out of sight, Kevin exhaled sharply. "This isn't enough," he muttered to the others. "He'll just keep coming back." Carl frowned. "What are you thinking?" Kevin's gaze hardened. "We make sure he doesn't have a job to come back to." The plan formed quickly, not out of brilliance but out of desperation. Kevin would submit a complaint through the rideshare platform, claiming a missing wallet after a short ride earlier that evening. Mark would corroborate as a witness. Carl would confirm seeing Ethan's car in the vicinity. False coordination was easier in a digital system built on user reports. Meanwhile, unaware of the full conversation but sensing something wrong, Olivia Grant turned the corner toward Peachtree Street with her camera still slung over her shoulder. She had stayed late to capture environmental shots for her developing article on driver disputes. Olivia paused when she noticed 3 men exiting the alley with tense body language. Her instincts sharpened. Years of watching subtle shifts in posture and expression had trained her to recognize when something unsaid lingered in the air. She lifted her camera discreetly and captured 2 quick frames. Kevin's profile, Mark's anxious glance over his shoulder, Carl adjusting his sleeve. She did not yet understand the significance, but she trusted patterns. Back inside Magnolia Brew, Daniel's screen flickered briefly. The transmitter signal from Ethan's vehicle stuttered. Interference for less than a second. Daniel's fingers tightened around his tablet. "Come on," he whispered. A second interruption blinked, then stabilized. Daniel stood up casually, leaving cash on the table. From outside, he had a clearer line of sight toward Ethan's parked sedan. He saw Ethan re-enter the vehicle, posture steady but movements slightly slower. Daniel's instincts urged him to intervene, but protocol restrained him. The intermediary inside the restaurant had not completed his meeting. If they disrupted the surveillance now, months of groundwork would collapse. He exhaled slowly, choosing restraint. Inside the car, Ethan felt warmth spreading along his side where bruises were forming. He ignored it. He adjusted the rearview mirror and resumed watch. Minutes later, his rideshare app chimed. A new complaint notification. He opened it without visible reaction. Passenger report. Wallet missing after ride, driver suspicious, request investigation. The name attached to the report was unfamiliar. No such ride had occurred. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. Kevin had moved faster than expected. Another notification followed. Platform review pending. Temporary account hold possible. Ethan understood the implication. If his account was suspended, his cover would fracture. Without rideshare activity history, the laundering network might detect inconsistency in the data trails they relied upon. Across the street, Daniel's phone vibrated with a mirrored alert from back-end monitoring software. "They're making a move," he murmured. But still, he could not step in, not without jeopardizing the primary objective. Kevin stood near his car, watching Ethan's expression carefully. He saw no panic. That unsettled him more than anger would have. Mark shifted uneasily. "What if it doesn't work?" "It will," Kevin said, though doubt flickered beneath his confidence. "Nobody questions a missing wallet." Olivia, reviewing her photos on the sidewalk, zoomed in on Kevin's face. There was something about the tension in his jaw that suggested more than a simple disagreement. She made a mental note to cross-reference his name later through rideshare forums. Back in the driver's seat, Ethan closed the complaint notification and locked his phone screen. Stepping onto the sidewalk with a phone pressed to his ear. Ethan's attention snapped back to the primary mission. Pain faded into irrelevance. The alley fell silent behind him. Kevin believed he had secured his territory. Olivia sensed the beginning of a story. Daniel monitored the fragile balance between exposure and success. And Ethan, bruised but unbroken, remained behind the wheel. Silent, calculating, unwilling to reveal himself. The plan against him had been set in motion. The night had only begun. Morning in downtown Atlanta arrived gray and heavy, the sky hanging low with clouds that threatened rain but refused to fall. The courthouse stood solid and pale against the muted skyline, its stone columns worn smooth by decades of footsteps and verdicts. People climbed the wide stairs with nervous energy, defendants adjusting ties, attorneys flipping through folders, reporters scanning faces for stories that might turn into headlines. Ethan Walker stood among them, wrists free but escorted by a uniformed officer whose grip lingered just slightly too long on his elbow. His hoodie had been replaced by a plain dark shirt provided during booking. The bruises along his ribs had deepened into shades of purple beneath the fabric, but his posture remained straight. Inside, fluorescent lights cast a sterile glow over polished wooden benches. The air carried the faint scent of paper and cleaning solution. Conversations hushed as names were called. Ethan's phone and identification had been confiscated the night before during processing. The temporary suspension notice from the rideshare platform had escalated into a formal complaint forwarded to local authorities. Without his credentials, he was just another accused driver facing charges of theft. Seated at the prosecution table was Assistant District Attorney Laura Simmons. Laura was in her early 30s, tall and composed, with dark auburn hair pulled into a precise bun at the nape of her neck. Her posture was disciplined, her navy suit sharply tailored. She had built her career on efficiency and measurable results. Growing up as the daughter of a public defender who often lost difficult cases, Laura had vowed to become the kind of prosecutor who left no ambiguity in a courtroom. Certainty, to her, meant justice. She glanced briefly at Ethan, her expression professional but distant. At the witness bench sat Mark Hensley, the same wiry driver from the alley. Under the harsh lighting, his nervous habits were magnified. He smoothed his thinning hair repeatedly and avoided prolonged eye contact with anyone in the room. Today, he wore a wrinkled button-down shirt that did not quite fit his narrow shoulders. He had agreed to testify that he had been a passenger in Ethan's car the previous evening and had discovered his wallet missing shortly after the ride. Kevin Doyle sat several rows behind him, arms folded, attempting confidence. His jaw remained tight. Carl Benton was absent, unwilling to appear publicly. The courtroom doors opened once more. Judge Richard Harlan entered with measured steps. At 60 years old, he was tall and broad-shouldered, though age had introduced stiffness into his movements. His silver hair was combed straight back. revealing a high forehead and deeply set blue-gray eyes. Lines framed his mouth permanently, giving him an expression that often appeared disapproving, even in neutrality. Raised in a generation that valued order above introspection, Harlan believed strongly in personal accountability. He prided himself on swift decisions and little tolerance for what he considered excuses. He adjusted his black robe as he took his seat. "Call the case." The clerk announced Ethan Walker's name. Ethan stepped forward calmly. Laura Simmons rose. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward matter. The defendant, operating as a rideshare driver, transported Mr. Mark Hensley on the evening of August 14th. Shortly thereafter, Mr. Hensley discovered his wallet missing. There were no other passengers in the vehicle. Attempts to contact the driver were unsuccessful." Judge Harlan's gaze shifted toward Ethan. "Mr. Walker, how do you plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor," Ethan replied evenly. Mark was sworn in. Under questioning, his voice trembled slightly at first. "I got into his car around 9, he said. "We drove maybe 10 minutes. When I got home, my wallet was gone. I called him through the app, but he didn't answer." Laura guided him gently. "Did you see anyone else enter the vehicle?" "No, ma'am." "Did you leave your wallet elsewhere that evening?" Mark hesitated barely a second too long. "No." From the gallery, Olivia Grant observed quietly, a small notebook balanced on her knee. She had arrived early after noticing the complaint escalate unusually fast. Her brown eyes tracked every pause in Mark's testimony. She had reviewed her photos from the night before and recognized him as one of the men leaving the alley. Something did not align. When Laura finished, Judge Harlan leaned forward. "Mr. Walker, would you like to respond?" Ethan stood. Without his phone, without agency credentials, he appeared stripped of authority. Just another man facing accusation. "I did not transport Mr. Hensley," he said. "No such ride occurred." Laura interjected. "Your Honor, the rideshare log confirms the ride was accepted." Ethan knew the platform's digital manipulation could be orchestrated by coordinated reporting, but he could not reveal internal monitoring protocols without exposing the broader investigation. Judge Harlan's expression hardened. "Mr. Walker, theft from passengers is not uncommon in this industry. If you are honest now, this court can consider leniency." The phrasing carried weight beyond the words themselves. Ethan met the judge's gaze without hostility. "I did not take anything." The silence that followed felt heavier than any raised voice. In the back row, Kevin shifted uncomfortably. He had expected agitation, perhaps anger. Ethan's composure unsettled him. Laura requested temporary suspension of Ethan's driving privileges pending investigation and recommended bail conditions restricting further rideshare operation. Judge Harlan nodded slowly. Given the evidence presented and the defendant's denial without corroboration, this court finds probable cause to proceed. Mr. Walker, you are advised that cooperation often leads to more favorable outcomes. His tone suggested inevitability. Outside the courtroom, Daniel Brooks stood near a marble pillar, disguised in a charcoal suit and thin-framed glasses. He maintained distance, careful not to acknowledge Ethan. His phone vibrated in his pocket with encrypted updates from federal headquarters. Earlier that morning, Daniel had briefed Deputy Director Samuel Reeves, a tall, reserved man in his late 50s with graying temples and a reputation for strategic patience. Reeves had listened without interruption. "Can we extract him?" Daniel had asked quietly. Reeves shook his head. "Not yet. The financial transfers we're tracking hit a critical note tonight. If we intervene now, the network scatters." Daniel understood the logic. It did not make it easier. Back inside, Olivia approached Laura during a brief recess. "Ms. Simmons," she said politely, flashing her press badge, "do you find it unusual that the complaint escalated within hours?" Laura's expression remained controlled. "Miss Grant, digital evidence moves quickly. Olivia nodded, but pressed gently. Would the court consider reviewing surrounding footage from the pickup location? Laura paused. If defense counsel requests it. There was no defense counsel. Ethan had declined public representation, unwilling to risk scrutiny of his background. Court resumed. Judge Harlan addressed Ethan once more. You may still reconsider your plea before formal charges are filed. Ethan's decision was calculated. Revealing his identity would collapse months of undercover work. Remaining silent meant enduring prejudice in plain sight. I stand by my statement, Your Honor. Judge Harlan exhaled through his nose, as though patience were thinning. Very well. The court will schedule further proceedings. In the meantime, Mr. Walker's rideshare privileges are suspended pending review. The gavel struck once. The sound echoed sharply. Olivia scribbled notes quickly. Her instincts told her the story was not as simple as presented. She circled Mark's name and wrote beside it, Alley Photo. Daniel watched Ethan exit through the side corridor. Their eyes met for less than half a second. An exchange of understanding without acknowledgement. Ethan walked past reporters without comment. Without phone, without credentials, just a man under accusation. The courthouse doors closed behind him as light rain finally began to fall, thin droplets streaking the stone steps. Inside the shadows of the legal system, perception had begun shaping reality, and Ethan, bound by silence, chose endurance over exposure. Rain lingered over Atlanta the following morning, not in heavy sheets but in a steady mist that blurred the edges of buildings and softened the noise of traffic. News vans lined the curb outside the courthouse. Microphones bore station logos in bold colors. Reporters stood beneath umbrellas rehearsing opening lines while camera operators adjusted focus rings. Inside, courtroom 3B felt tighter than before. Word had spread quickly about the rideshare driver who refused to cooperate. Curiosity had grown into spectacle. Ethan Walker stood at the defense table, hands resting lightly against the polished wood. He wore the same dark shirt from the previous hearing, though faint bruising along his jaw had begun to yellow. His posture remained straight, eyes calm but alert. He knew what he was about to do would shift the balance. Judge Richard Harlan entered with his usual deliberate pace, though he seemed faintly aware of the additional press presence. His silver hair was immaculate, his robe pressed sharply. He disliked distractions in his courtroom. To him, justice required order, not theatrics. Assistant District Attorney Laura Simmons reviewed her notes, expression precise and controlled. She sensed the unusual energy in the room, but interpreted it as media appetite, not instability in the case. In the gallery, Olivia Grant sat closer to the aisle this time, laptop open, camera ready beside her. She wore a charcoal blazer over a soft blue blouse. Her hair was pulled back loosely, a few strands falling forward when she leaned down to type. Olivia had not slept much. She had spent the night reviewing timestamp data from rideshare forums and cross-checking complaint escalation patterns. Something about the speed of Ethan's suspension troubled her. Daniel Brooks stood near the back exit, blending among observers. His suit was understated, his expression unreadable. A discreet earpiece rested against his right ear, though to others it looked like nothing more than a hearing device. The clerk called the case. Laura began smoothly. Your Honor, the prosecution maintains that the digital ride log and witness testimony establish sufficient cause. The defendant has provided no evidence to contradict the claim. Judge Harlan nodded. Mr. Walker, this is your opportunity to clarify your position. Ethan inhaled slowly. This was the moment. He stepped forward. Your Honor, with respect, I request that the court examine the integrity of the complaint system itself. A murmur rippled through the room. Laura stiffened slightly. The system has been verified by the platform. Ethan continued, voice steady but firm. Has the platform verified that the ride in question occurred physically or only digitally? Judge Harlan's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Ethan's tone sharpened, not emotional, but deliberate. "A digital record can be generated. It does not prove that a person entered my vehicle." Laura objected. "Speculation." Ethan turned toward the gallery briefly, making sure his voice carried. "Speculation would be assuming guilt without verifying the underlying data." The room shifted. Judge Harlan tapped his pen against the bench. "Mr. Walker, are you suggesting fabrication?" "I am suggesting," Ethan replied clearly, "that I did not transport the alleged passenger, and that no physical evidence has been presented beyond an electronic entry." Cameras clicked softly. Olivia's fingers flew across her keyboard. She sensed the narrative tilting. This was no longer a simple theft hearing, it was a challenge to procedural trust. Laura regained composure. "Your Honor, the defendant is attempting to create confusion where none exists." Ethan met her gaze directly. "Confusion exists when a man is accused without proof beyond a manipulated log." Judge Harlan's expression hardened. "Be careful, Mr. Walker. Accusing others of misconduct without evidence will not help you." Ethan did not retreat. "Then allow the evidence to be examined thoroughly. Subpoena location data from surrounding traffic cameras. Verify whether my vehicle moved as claimed." The request was precise. Laura hesitated for half a second, long enough for observant eyes to notice. From the back of the room, Daniel's phone vibrated silently. He glanced down at an encrypted notification. National monitoring systems had flagged increased media traction around Ethan's name. Federal Command was watching. Judge Harlan leaned back. "Mr. Walker, you seem unusually prepared for a rideshare driver." The implication lingered. Ethan allowed a brief pause before responding. "Preparedness is not a crime, Your Honor." Soft laughter echoed from somewhere in the gallery before dying quickly under the judge's stare. Laura requested a brief recess. Outside the courtroom, reporters gathered near the hallway. As Ethan was escorted past them, one voice called out, "Are you claiming systemic flaws?" Ethan stopped deliberately. The officer beside him tensed. "I am claiming," Ethan said clearly, "that truth deserves verification." That sentence was recorded on 3 separate cameras. Within an hour, clips began circulating online. Headlines formed rapidly. "Driver challenges court procedure." "Rideshare accused demands evidence review." In a federal operations room miles away, Deputy Director Samuel Reeves watched the live feed with growing concern. Reeves was a disciplined man with steel-gray hair and a lined face that rarely betrayed emotion. He valued containment above exposure. "Media traction is spiking," an analyst reported. Reeves exhaled slowly. If his identity is uncovered prematurely, the operation collapses. Daniel's voice came through encrypted channel. "He's controlling the narrative." "For now," Reeves replied. Back inside, court resumed. Judge Harlan addressed Ethan with visible irritation. "This court will not become a stage for political commentary." Ethan's voice remained controlled, but louder than before. "This is not commentary. It is a request for fairness." The word fairness carried weight. Laura countered by emphasizing the reliability of digital records. She requested the court proceed without delay. Judge Harlan considered for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. "The court will maintain the current restrictions on Mr. Walker pending further review. However, additional evidence may be submitted." His tone suggested reluctance. Outside, Olivia uploaded her article draft with a bold headline, "When a complaint becomes a conviction." In it, she questioned the transparency of complaint systems and the absence of physical verification in Ethan's case. She avoided declaring innocence, but highlighted inconsistencies. Within hours, the article was shared widely. Kevin Doyle read it from his kitchen table, coffee growing cold beside him. His jaw clenched as he scrolled through comments. Some defended Ethan, Others accused the media of bias. The narrative was slipping from his control. "He's making us look like liars," Mark muttered when Kevin called him. Kevin's frustration burned hotter than before. "He thinks he's smarter than everyone." Carl's voice joined hesitantly on speaker. "Maybe we should let it go." Kevin's silence turned sharp. "No, he embarrassed us. Now he's on the news acting righteous." Back in the Federal Operations Center, alarms did not ring, but the pressure rose. Reeves made the decision. "Draft emergency release," he instructed. "Cite insufficient evidence and procedural review." Daniel nodded once, relief hidden beneath professionalism. Late afternoon light filtered through courthouse windows when the announcement came. Due to procedural concerns and lack of corroborating physical evidence, Ethan Walker was to be released from custody pending further investigation. Judge Harlan read the order with measured restraint, though his jaw tightened slightly. Ethan stood silently as the ruling echoed through the room. Reporters surged forward outside. Microphones extended. Flashbulbs burst. "Mr. Walker, do you feel vindicated?" He paused only briefly. "I feel that scrutiny is necessary." The statement fueled headlines further. By evening, his face appeared across local news broadcasts. Commentators debated whether he was a troublemaker exploiting loopholes or a citizen challenging flawed systems. His rideshare account remained suspended. His name trended briefly on social media under polarized hashtags. Daniel met him discreetly in a parking garage beneath a downtown office tower. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. "You made noise," Daniel said quietly. "I had to," Ethan replied. Reeves' directive was clear. Reduce visibility immediately, but damage had already spread. Kevin watched a television segment replaying Ethan's courtroom remarks. His expression hardened into something colder than anger. "He wants attention," Kevin muttered. "We'll give him more than that." The rain finally stopped outside, leaving the streets slick and reflective under city lights. Ethan stepped into the night air free but marked. His name had been cleared temporarily. His reputation had not. The noise he created protected the mission, but it painted a target on his back. The night air over Atlanta had cleared after days of lingering mist, leaving the streets sharp and reflective beneath neon lights and traffic signals. Downtown hummed with its usual restless pulse. Sirens in the distance, engines idling at intersections, the low murmur of conversation spilling from late-night bars. To most people, it was just another evening in a city that rarely slept. For Ethan Walker, it was the calm before another calculated storm. He stood beside his silver sedan in a dim parking lot behind an office complex, hands resting lightly in his jacket pockets. His posture was relaxed, but his mind remained alert. The bruises from the alley had faded to dull shadows beneath his skin. His rideshare account remained suspended, but for the sake of operational consistency, the vehicle stayed active in monitored logs. Across town, Kevin Doyle sat inside his own car beneath a flickering street lamp. The glow cast uneven shadows across his face, highlighting the frustration that had hardened there over the past days. His stocky frame leaned forward over the steering wheel as he stared at his phone. He had not expected Ethan to walk free so easily. The public attention had bruised his pride more than any physical fight could have. Mark Hensley sat in the passenger seat beside him, fingers tapping anxiously against his knee. His narrow face looked thinner under stress, eyes darting frequently toward passing headlights. "This is going too far," Mark muttered. Kevin's jaw tightened. "He made it public. Now people think we lied." Carl Benton stood a few feet away near another vehicle, arms folded across his heavy chest. He shifted his weight uneasily. Unlike Kevin, Carl disliked escalation. He had joined the first confrontation out of loyalty, not strategy. But pride, once engaged, is difficult to retreat from. Kevin's voice lowered. We make this about something bigger, something undeniable. Earlier that afternoon, Kevin had contacted a distant acquaintance, Ryan Cole, a part-time mechanic in his late 20s with a lean build and perpetually grease-stained hands. Ryan had once been cited for insurance fraud after staging minor collisions for payouts. His dark hair was always tucked under a baseball cap, his expression guarded. He had learned early that bending truth sometimes paid faster than hard work. In a poorly lit side street several blocks from Ethan's usual surveillance zone, Kevin positioned Ryan's older sedan near a traffic camera with known blind spots. The plan was simple in theory. Stage a minor collision during a window when Ethan's vehicle data could be manipulated to suggest proximity. Ryan sat behind the wheel, gripping it tightly. "You sure about this?" he asked, voice uncertain. Kevin nodded. "He's already under suspicion. One more complaint, and he's done." Mark stood watch at the corner, anxiety written plainly across his posture. The impact, when it came, was controlled but loud enough to draw attention. Ryan's sedan rolled gently into a parked delivery truck, crumpling the front bumper. Kevin immediately dialed emergency services, reporting a hit-and-run involving a silver rideshare vehicle matching Ethan's. By the time police arrived, Kevin's narrative was polished. Officer Denise Carter stepped out of the patrol car first. She was in her mid-30s, average height with a firm athletic build. Her dark hair was pulled tightly into a bun beneath her cap. Her eyes were observant, scanning scenes quickly before accepting surface explanations. Raised by a firefighter father who emphasized accountability, Denise approached every call with cautious neutrality. "You're saying the vehicle struck him and fled?" she asked Kevin. "Yes, ma'am," Kevin replied, voice steady. "Silver sedan. Same driver who's been causing problems around here." Ryan nodded, playing his part. Denise took notes, though her brow furrowed slightly at the precision of Kevin's description. "License plate?" Kevin recited Ethan's plate number without hesitation. Across town, Ethan received a call from an unfamiliar number. He answered calmly. "Mr. Walker?" Denise's voice came through firm and professional. "We need you to come in regarding a traffic incident." Within the hour, Ethan stood once more beneath the courthouse's pale lights. The building felt colder this time. News of a second accusation spread faster than the first. Reporters framed it as escalation. Controversial driver linked to hit and run. Olivia Grant read the alert from her newsroom desk. She felt a chill of recognition. The timing was too precise. She grabbed her camera and drove toward the reported accident site. At the scene, she photographed the damaged sedan and delivery truck. She noticed something subtle. The angle of impact suggested minimal speed, inconsistent with a vehicle fleeing recklessly. More importantly, a nearby storefront had a security camera angled toward the street. The shop belonged to Mrs. Helen Ramirez, a petite woman in her early 60s with silver-streaked black hair and sharp, kind eyes. She had owned the small bakery for nearly 30 years. Known for her warmth and strict fairness, Helen had once testified in court to protect a former employee falsely accused of theft. Truth mattered to her deeply. Olivia approached politely. "Ma'am, do your cameras capture the street?" Helen nodded slowly. "They do." "Why?" Olivia explained briefly. Helen considered for a moment before leading her inside. "If someone is lying," she said softly, "I don't tolerate that." Meanwhile, in courtroom 3B, the atmosphere had shifted from curiosity to skepticism. Judge Richard Harlan sat with folded hands, his blue-gray eyes fixed on Ethan. There was something about this pattern, two accusations in such close proximity, that unsettled him. Yet instead of interpreting it as coordinated hostility, he leaned toward a simpler explanation. Repetition suggests guilt. Assistant District Attorney Laura Simmons presented the new charge methodically. "Your Honor, witness testimony places the defendant's vehicle at the scene of a collision before fleeing." Ethan stood silently, absorbing the claim. Judge Harlan spoke carefully. "Mr. Walker, you again deny involvement?" "I was not present at that location," Ethan replied evenly. The judge studied him. For a fraction of a second, doubt flickered across his face. Ethan's composure was not typical of someone cornered twice. But prejudice often disguises itself as logic. "You seem to attract trouble, Mr. Walker," Harlan said. "Trouble can be manufactured," Ethan answered calmly. A murmur moved through the gallery. Harlan's patience thinned. "This court cannot operate on conspiracy theories." Without reviewing additional footage or requesting independent verification, he delivered his decision swiftly. Temporary detainment pending further review and reinstatement of restrictive conditions. The gavel struck. Outside, Daniel Brooks stood beside a dark sedan, phone pressed to his ear. On the other end was Deputy Director Samuel Reeves. "The operation goes public tomorrow," Reeves said. "We're finalizing arrest warrants nationwide." Daniel glanced toward the courthouse steps where Ethan was being escorted. "He won't hold forever." "He doesn't need to," Reeves replied. "Just until the announcement." Inside her bakery, Helen Ramirez transferred security footage to Olivia's portable drive, the timestamp displayed clearly. At the reported time of the collision, Ethan's silver sedan was visible 2 blocks away, parked and stationary. Olivia felt adrenaline surge. This was proof. But the court had already ruled for the day. Ethan sat in a holding room beneath fluorescent lights, hands clasped loosely before him. He understood what was happening. Pressure was mounting from multiple directions. Yet the larger operation, months of undercover infiltration, was hours from completion. He closed his eyes briefly, centering himself. Above ground, Atlanta's skyline glowed under clear night skies. The city moved forward unaware of the collision between truth and perception, unfolding within its institutions. Kevin watched a news segment from his living room. Satisfaction mixed uneasily with tension. Mark avoided eye contact. Carl stared at the floor. In the courthouse basement, Ethan remained silent. Judge Harlan returned to his chambers, unsettled but convinced of procedural correctness. And somewhere in a federal operations room, screens displayed countdown timers toward a coordinated national reveal. For now, the accusation stood. The second shadow had fallen. The air inside the courthouse felt heavier than usual, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Outside, Atlanta shimmered beneath a pale autumn sun, the sky clear and deceptively calm. Commuters crossed intersections without knowing that by noon, headlines across the nation would shift their attention to this very building. Judge Richard Harlan sat rigidly at the bench as clerks shuffled paperwork. His expression carried a faint strain he had not acknowledged even to himself. The second accusation had been ruled upon swiftly the day before, and though he had acted within procedural boundaries, a quiet unease lingered in his thoughts. Ethan Walker stood once again before him, posture upright despite the fatigue etched lightly around his eyes. He wore the same dark shirt, now pressed neatly, though the strain of detention was visible only to those trained to recognize it. His hands were free, but the weight of public suspicion still rested on his shoulders. Assistant District Attorney Laura Simmons was present, reviewing documentation with habitual efficiency. Her confidence remained intact, though she sensed the increasing scrutiny outside the courtroom. The gavel struck lightly to begin the session. Before proceedings could resume fully, a low murmur rippled through the gallery. A court clerk hurried toward the bench, whispering something into Judge Harlan's ear. The judge's brow furrowed, then lifted slightly in confusion. Simultaneously, phones began vibrating across the room. Olivia Grant felt her own device buzz sharply against her palm. She glanced down, expecting another local update. Instead, bold letters flashed across the screen. Federal operation exposes nationwide money laundering network. Dozens arrested. She opened the live broadcast immediately. On the screen stood Deputy Director Samuel Reeves, framed by the American flag and the seal of the Department of Justice. Reeves's steel-gray hair caught the studio lights as he spoke in a measured, authoritative tone. After a 6-month undercover operation, federal authorities have dismantled a complex money laundering network operating through Shell Transportation Services and affiliated businesses across multiple states. Images began cycling behind him. Raids in Chicago, Miami, Los Angeles. Then came a slide displaying a group of agents in formal attire. Among them stood Ethan Walker. The caption read, "Lead Field Operative, Ethan Walker." The courtroom fell silent. Olivia's heart pounded. She stared at the screen, then slowly lifted her eyes toward Ethan, who stood motionless in front of the bench. His face revealed no surprise, only quiet acceptance. Judge Harlan's complexion drained of color. His hands, usually steady, tightened against the wood. He turned to Laura Simmons, who was equally stunned. "What is this?" the judge demanded softly. Before anyone could answer, 2 men in dark suits entered the courtroom through the side door. Their presence was calm, but unmistakably authoritative. The taller of the 2 stepped forward. He was in his early 40s, clean-shaven with sharp cheekbones and an unyielding gaze. His navy suit fit precisely, his posture disciplined. He carried a sealed document in his hand. "Your Honor," he said clearly, "I am Special Agent Marcus Hill with Federal Internal Operations. We are here to formally request the immediate release of Agent Ethan Walker." The room seemed to exhale all at once. Judge Harlan stared at Ethan as if seeing him for the first time. Agent Walker. The title hung in the air. Laura Simmons rose slowly, her professional composure shaken but not broken. "Your Honor, if this is accurate—" "It is," Marcus Hill replied firmly. "Agent Walker has been operating under deep cover. Any public proceedings have compromised an active investigation." Judge Harlan removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. His earlier certainty now felt dangerously fragile. In the back row, Kevin Doyle sat frozen. He had come to observe, anticipating confirmation of Ethan's downfall. Instead, he watched the broadcast in disbelief. His mouth opened slightly, but no words followed. Mark Hensley shifted uncomfortably beside him, eyes wide. Carl Benton's breathing grew heavier, panic settling visibly across his features. Olivia stood abruptly, raising her camera as the broadcast continued. Reeves' voice echoed clearly from multiple devices. "We commend the courage and discipline of the agents involved. Their identities remained concealed despite personal risk." Ethan did not look toward the screens. His gaze remained forward, steady. Judge Harlan cleared his throat. "The court acknowledges receipt of federal documentation. All charges against Mr. Agent Walker are dismissed effective immediately." The gavel struck again, but this time the sound carried an entirely different meaning. Court officers stepped aside. Ethan exhaled slowly, tension easing just slightly from his shoulders. Outside, news crews erupted into motion. Microphones extended toward courthouse doors. Social media platforms exploded with updates. Olivia was the first journalist to publish a verified article linking Ethan Walker to the federal operation. Her headline was precise and restrained. "Undercover agent cleared amid national investigation." She included documented confirmation from the Department of Justice, ensuring accuracy before speculation could distort the narrative. Within minutes, her report was shared widely. Back inside, Marcus Hill approached Ethan quietly. "You held," he said in a low voice. Ethan nodded once. "The operation?" "Completed. Arrests across 7 states." Daniel Brooks entered from the rear exit, no longer concealing his association. He removed his glasses, offering Ethan a firm handshake. Daniel was composed as always, though relief softened his features. "We finished it," he said. For the first time in days, Ethan allowed himself a faint smile. Judge Harlan descended from the bench, something he rarely did. Standing before Ethan, he appeared smaller somehow. Not physically, but morally unsettled. "Agent Walker," he began, voice lower than usual. "This court was not informed." Ethan met his gaze calmly. "I understand." There was no accusation in his tone. Kevin attempted to slip toward the exit, but uniformed officers blocked his path. Officer Denise Carter stepped forward, her expression firm. "Mr. Doyle," she said evenly, "you are under investigation for filing false reports and providing fabricated testimony." Mark's shoulders slumped. Carl avoided eye contact entirely. Helen Ramirez's security footage, previously delivered to Olivia, was now being reviewed formally by federal investigators. The time-stamped video clearly contradicted the hit-and-run claim. Judge Harlan watched as Kevin was escorted from the courtroom. A realization settled heavily upon him, not just about the false accusation, but about the assumptions that had guided his swift rulings. Laura Simmons gathered her files quietly. Her belief in procedure remained intact, but she understood now that procedure without complete inquiry can mislead. Outside, sunlight reflected off courthouse steps as Ethan emerged. Cameras flashed rapidly. "Agent Walker," a reporter called. "How did it feel to be accused?" Ethan paused only briefly. It felt like patience was necessary. Daniel stood a few steps behind him, scanning the crowd with professional vigilance. Olivia approached cautiously. "Agent Walker, do you have a comment on the allegations made against you?" Ethan regarded her thoughtfully. "Truth doesn't always arrive first," he said calmly, "but it arrives." She nodded, recognizing both the headline and the lesson embedded in his words. Across the nation, networks replayed his photograph in formal attire beside images from the operation raids. The narrative shifted from suspicion to recognition. In the courthouse chambers, Judge Harlan sat alone for several minutes after proceedings ended. He stared at the empty bench before him, contemplating how easily confidence can overshadow doubt. Downstairs, Ethan and Daniel walked toward an unmarked black sedan waiting at the curb. "You ready to disappear again?" Daniel asked lightly. Ethan glanced once more at the courthouse behind them. "For now." They entered the vehicle as agents secured Kevin and his associates for further investigation. Atlanta resumed its rhythm under the midday sun, unaware of how close injustice had come to becoming permanent. The truth had arrived. Public, undeniable, and irreversible. Autumn settled gently over Atlanta in the days that followed. The air carried a cooler edge, brushing against courthouse steps that had recently witnessed accusation, exposure, and release. Fallen leaves gathered along the sidewalks, stirred by passing cars and early morning wind. The city had already begun moving on, as cities often do. But inside courtroom 3B, something unfinished waited. The final hearing was not about Ethan Walker's guilt. Those charges had been dismissed. It was about sentencing for Kevin Doyle and the others involved in fabricating evidence and filing false reports. The courtroom was quieter this time, though no less significant. Ethan stood near the front, no longer escorted, no longer restrained. He wore a dark tailored suit that fit his tall, lean frame with understated precision. His posture remained disciplined, shoulders squared but not rigid. The bruises that once marked his face had faded completely. In their place was a calm expression that suggested clarity rather than victory. Judge Richard Harlan entered more slowly than usual. There was a subtle difference in him now. His posture, once commanding and almost inflexible, carried a trace of reflection. His silver hair was as neatly combed as ever, but his eyes did not project the same certainty. Instead, they held awareness, an awareness born not of humiliation, but of confrontation with personal error. Kevin Doyle sat at the defense table, shoulders slumped. Without the protective shield of bravado, he looked younger than before. His stocky frame seemed smaller beneath a plain detention uniform. His jaw, once clenched in defiance, now rested slack with fatigue. days in custody had stripped him of his narrative control. His eyes occasionally lifted toward Ethan, but only briefly before dropping again. Mark Hensley sat beside him, thinner still, hands clasped tightly together. Carl Benton occupied the seat at the end, silent and withdrawn. Assistant District Attorney Laura Simmons presented the formal summary of their charges: false reporting, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and providing fabricated testimony. Her tone remained professional, though it carried none of the earlier certainty directed toward Ethan. After her presentation, Judge Harlan turned his attention to Ethan. "Agent Walker," he began, voice measured, "the court recognizes your role in the events leading to today's proceedings. You have the opportunity to make a statement before sentencing." A faint shift rippled through the gallery. Olivia Grant sat in the second row, pen poised over her notebook. She wore a soft gray sweater today instead of a blazer, her hair loose over her shoulders. She had chosen not to sensationalize the previous developments. Instead, she had written carefully, verifying every detail before publication. Her upcoming article already had a working title in her mind. Ethan stepped forward. For a moment, he simply looked at Kevin. Kevin could not hold his gaze. Ethan's voice, when he spoke, was steady, but gentle. "Your Honor, I do not stand here seeking punishment." A murmur rose faintly, then faded. Judge Harlan leaned forward slightly. Ethan continued, "Prejudice is born from fear, but justice is born from understanding." The words were simple, unadorned, but they carried weight that filled the room. "I will not pretend that what happened did not cause harm," Ethan said. "It did. It damaged reputations, strained trust, and nearly undermined lawful process. But I believe accountability does not always require destruction." Kevin's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. "I ask this court to consider structured community education programs instead of extended incarceration," Ethan said. "Programs that address bias, civic responsibility, and conflict resolution." Laura Simmons blinked once, surprised. Judge Harlan studied Ethan carefully. "You are requesting leniency for the individuals who fabricated charges against you." "Yes, Your Honor." "Why?" Ethan paused briefly. "Because transformation is more powerful than retaliation." Silence settled fully across the room. Kevin finally lifted his eyes, confusion and disbelief mingling there. In the gallery, Olivia felt something shift internally. She had covered corruption, fraud, and injustice before. Rarely had she witnessed someone offer the chance for retribution, choose restoration instead. Judge Harlan removed his glasses slowly. "In my years on this bench," he began, voice softer than usual, "I have prided myself on efficiency, on decisiveness." He glanced toward Ethan. "But decisiveness without humility can become error." He stood. "This court acknowledges that it failed to exercise sufficient skepticism in the earlier proceedings involving Agent Walker. I failed." The admission hung in the air, fragile but sincere. "I allowed assumptions to accelerate judgment," Harlan continued. "For that, I apologize publicly." Kevin shifted uncomfortably. Mark's breathing grew shallow. Judge Harlan resumed his seat. "In light of Agent Walker's request and the broader circumstances, this court sentences Mr. Doyle, Mr. Hensley, and Mr. Benton to a reduced custodial term combined with mandatory participation in a supervised community education and restorative justice program." The gavel struck, not harshly but firmly. Kevin exhaled as if he had been holding his breath for days. It was not relief exactly, but it was not devastation either. As proceedings concluded, Ethan stepped down from the front of the courtroom. Kevin rose hesitantly. Kevin began, then stopped. Ethan waited. Kevin's voice was lower than it had ever been. "I thought you were just another driver." Ethan's expression did not harden. "That's the problem." Kevin swallowed. "I didn't think—" "No," Ethan said gently. You didn't." There was no anger in his tone, only truth. Court officers guided Kevin and the others away. Outside, autumn sunlight filtered through trees lining the courthouse steps. Olivia stood near the base of the stairs, typing quickly into her phone. Her article went live within the hour. The headline read, "More than a driver." In it, she described not just the operation, nor the courtroom reversal, but the decision that followed. The choice to extend mercy rather than demand punishment. She wrote about how bias can distort perception, and how courage sometimes appears in restraint rather than confrontation. The piece spread quickly. In a holding facility on the outskirts of the city, Kevin sat alone later that evening. The cell was small but clean. A narrow window allowed thin strands of fading light to slip inside. Across from him sat an older inmate named Thomas Green, a tall, quiet man in his late 50s with graying dreadlocks and thoughtful eyes. Thomas had once served time for financial fraud before turning his life toward mentorship programs inside the facility. "You look like someone who just lost a fight," Thomas said calmly. Kevin stared at the floor. "I thought I was right." Thomas nodded slowly. "Most people do." Kevin leaned back against the wall. "He could have ruined me." Thomas studied him carefully. "And he didn't." Kevin exhaled. "Why?" Thomas offered a small, knowing smile. "Maybe because he's stronger than you thought." The words lingered long after the lights dimmed. Back downtown, Judge Harlan remained alone in his chambers after hours. He removed his robe and folded it carefully. For the first time in years, he pulled out an old law school notebook from a drawer, a reminder of principles written before routine hardened into certainty. He sat quietly reflecting. Ethan and Daniel walked together toward a quiet street where an unmarked vehicle waited. "You didn't have to do that," Daniel said softly. Ethan looked up at the fading sky. "Yes, I did." Daniel nodded once, understanding. As they drove away, Atlanta's skyline shimmered in the distance, no longer a battlefield of accusation, but a city returning to equilibrium. The man, who had once been seen only as a driver, had revealed something far greater. Not just truth, grace. This story is not only about a man who was wrongly accused. It is about how quickly we judge, how easily we assume, and how rarely we pause to truly understand the person standing in front of us. In everyday life, we meet people in simple roles: a driver, a cashier, a security guard, a co-worker, a stranger walking past us on the street. We see a surface, and we create a story in our minds. But we do not know their battles, their responsibilities, their sacrifices, or their strength. Just because someone appears ordinary does not mean they are not carrying extraordinary purpose. Prejudice does not always shout. Sometimes it whispers in small assumptions. Sometimes it hides in jokes. Sometimes it disguises itself as confidence. But every time we assume someone is less because of their skin, background, or position, we weaken our own character. Ethan chose dignity when he was insulted. He chose restraint when he was attacked. He chose truth when he was accused. And most importantly, he chose grace when he had the power to destroy those who hurt him. That is the deepest lesson. Real strength is not proven by how hard you hit back. It is proven by how well you stand firm without becoming what tried to break you. In our daily lives, we may never stand in a courtroom, but we stand in smaller courts every day. In our homes, in our workplaces, in conversations, in how we speak about people who are different from us, in how we react when we feel wronged. Ask yourself today, do I judge too quickly? Do I listen before I speak? Do I treat people with dignity even when I disagree? Education is not only found in schools, it is found in humility. Growth is not only about success, it is about correction. And justice is not only about punishment, it is about understanding. Let this story remind us that white and black, rich and poor, powerful and unknown, we all share the same human worth. Character has no color, Integrity has no race. Courage has no stereotype. If this message touched you, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment and tell us where you are watching from. Let us build a community that chooses understanding over assumption. Subscribe to the channel so we can continue telling stories that challenge prejudice and inspire growth. Your support helps these lessons reach more hearts. May God bless every person reading this. May He give you wisdom when you are judged, patience when you are misunderstood, and grace when you have the power to retaliate. If you believe that dignity is stronger than hate, comment Amen.